for now. It's all good. Got it. Do this. And yes, y'all. So here we are back at it again with the white vans. So what we're going to talk about today, we're actually going to build out a site that leverages what we know about HTML and CSS to take it to the next level and talk about a couple more aspects of simple HTML and CSS that's going to come up whenever you're building kind of regular vanilla HTML and CSS websites. And so today we're going to build a little kind of like micro blog, if you will. Like it'll be a site that just reviews certain songs that we like or don't like and just have strong opinions on. You can leverage the same little kind of concept to build a simple website for yourself that will allow you to link to other pages and put some text or whatever you want on the other pages. And so the goal for today is multi-page HTML, and it should be a good time building it. So let's start with what we do best and open up a new developer environment for ourselves to work off of. So like I talked to y'all about, I like to use VS Code as my text editor of choice. You can use any text editor or code editor that you prefer, but for me, VS Code is a handy one. I don't get paid to say that, but I just like to tell y'all what I like to use. So what I'm gonna do first is open and create a new project in VS Code. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I like to go to open folder, and I like to make sure that the folder that I like to structure my project so that they're in folders. So right now I have in my, I have a couple different places where I like to save my work. I have a folder called comp that I like to put things in. And sometimes when I'm working on personal projects, I'll put my stuff in here. But for the sake of right now, I'm just gonna create a new folder, and we're gonna call this song reviews, basically, right? So I have this this new folder that I just created, and what I want to do is open it in VS Code, and in VS Code it'll open up that particular folder. So I'm ready to rock. My thing is opening folders is just a great way to make sure that you stay organized as you start creating new files and connecting those different files to your actual page. So every project I work on, I like to keep it in a folder, and we'll see why hopefully by the end of this when we get to pushing that content up to GitHub. Don't mind all my deprecated extensions. Got to fix that later. Okay, so when we're talking about HTML, it's very simple getting started, because with every HTML project that you're going to work on, you need an HTML file. So what you want to do first is create a new HTML file. So I'm going to just do that real quick by just creating a new file called index.html. If you didn't see, I just clicked this little button real quick, but you can also do file and a new file, but just make sure that you name whatever you create index.html. That's going to allow for us to start the process of working on creating a new HTML document. And VS Code is such a great text editor and code editor because it allows for, it knows now that we're working on an HTML file, so it'll help us by auto-completing some of the more common aspects of the HTML file, and then doing certain little small things like closing our tags for us to make sure we don't forget to close a specific tag. Every HTML page that you're going to work on starts with a nice little declaration that says, hey, this is an HTML document. So we're going to go ahead and make that little declaration right there. And then you'll find that all HTML documents have a set of 3 tags that are very common, no matter what you're working on. So the first one is the HTML tag, which opens and closes just like this. The second is the head, and then the third is the body, right? So the head is where we'll store all types of metadata about our website, things like the title, things like our style sheet, things like SEO optimization, descriptions, metadata, etc. All that will live in the head. The body is where all of our visual elements will take place. And so let me just zoom in here just a little bit so it's easier for y'all to see. And when my computer stops being mad at me for doing that, we'll keep it rocking. So just close this, give ourselves some more space. So what do we want to do? We want to build a site, and I'll just tell you the goal here. The goal is to build a site that will allow for us to show a list of different songs or a list of anything really, and basically allow for us to go to a separate page related to that. So you could use this as maybe a beginner blog for yourself, or you might use it as just a place to reference a couple things that have their own HTML pages. But to get started, the first thing what we want to do is just kind of get a general page up so that we can view our work. So what I'm going to do is just some simple HTML to just have something visual show up in our body. So I'm just going to say H1, and I'm going to say Cam's song reviews, plural, because I'm going to go in on some songs. And from there, right, this is enough of HTML in the body to actually have something show up, right? And so typically what we want to do is see our HTML as we're working on it so that we know, hey, like what's happening as we're making changes. And so last time we worked on HTML, I showed you how you can go ahead and open a new file in your browser. And every HTML file you work on will be able to open into a browser if you just open the actual HTML file tied to that particular folder that you're working on. So as you can see here in the URL, we have my particular HTML file that I just created in that directory called song reviews that we just made. So this is one way for us to see these HTML files, and it is helpful, right? So like if I go back to VS Code and I add something else, like maybe a paragraph, and say, this is my detailed explanation of my favorite songs and how I feel about them, right? Add in that paragraph. If I go back to this opened file and refresh, we can continue to see the different changes we're making. But it does get kind of annoying to have to go to the file, refresh each time that I want to see something. And that's when you can make use of a very cool feature in VS Code that allows for you to actually host your HTML code in a server so you can see the changes being made without having to refresh the page so much. So this process you could do if you built your own server, but VS Code has a really cool extension that makes this very easy. So all you have to do if you want to make use of what we call the live server extension in VS Code is you want to go to a VS Code window for yourself and make sure that you open up the extensions tab in VS Code. So VS Code allows you to download a number of different extensions that will allow for you to customize your developer experience a bit more personally, and then add things like the live server, which will just make your workflow a little bit easier. When it finally loads, what you want to do is inside of the search extensions box, just type in live server, and you'll see a particular set of different search results pop in there. But the one that you're looking for is the live server with Ritwick Day as the author. So when you click on that live server and you go ahead, and when you look at it, you'll see something that's like install. I already have it installed on my machine, so it's showing disable here. But when you look at it, it'll say install. And so you give it a little click, and what will happen is the extension will download on your VS Code. Once it finishes downloading, you can X out of it. And what the live server will allow you to do is it'll allow you to open your files that you're working on in a server environment. And so without getting too detailed about what's going on with the live server, it will allow for you to open the files that you're working on and see them update over time as you're editing them inside of VS Code. So instead of having to refresh and all of that, it will allow for your file, your instance on your browser to update with whatever the latest changes are in your file. To open that HTML with the live server, after you install it, all you have to do is right click on the file and just click open with live server. It's an option that pops up. That option will start the live server and it will bring you back to your browser. and then you'll see a different tab open up that has a different URL than if you were to have opened the file itself alone. So the file itself, right, as you can see, is marked with the file path and then the name of the path on my machine, right? The live server instance actually starts with this local IP address, right? And so again, without getting too detailed about what's going on with within the weeds of it, the live server opens up a development server for us on our machine, and that development server is hosting our little HTML file. But what's cool about the live server is as I go ahead and make some changes, so let's say I get rid of this paragraph or something like that, right, and save it, the live server automatically updates. So I don't have to go ahead and continue to refresh and waste that time doing that when I just want to see my website. I just want to see my website. I don't have to keep press the refresh and all that. So quick thumbs up if that's a helpful tip for yourselves. The live server is definitely going to come in handy when you're working on regular HTML and CSS sites. When we start getting into like React and more kind of comprehensive JavaScript-based HTML frameworks, you'd actually don't need to do all of the live server stuff because some of those helpful mechanisms are built into many of the packages that we use to build our more advanced sites out. But for now, whenever you're working on a regular HTML site, it's great to use the live server so that you can see the changes that you're making in real time. So here's what we're going to do. Let's keep adding some stuff to our particular website. So Cam song reviews, Rebet. So what I want to do is have this site just kind of be a staple in the hip hop blogger community. I want people to know my opinions on certain things. And so I'm going to use this as a space to write reviews of my favorite songs. One thing I want to do just to make it so that we remember, hey, the head is for XYZ, I'm going to add some of the common elements that we do put in the head. So the title, so I'm going to say Cam's song reviews, put in that title in there. We'll change the title here on that tab to Cam song reviews, which is great. And later we'll go in here and we might add some CSS so that we have some other tags to use in the head. For now, though, we're going to continue to just work out some more stuff here in the body. So Cam song reviews, great, nice little heading going on there with the H1. Remember, you can highlight over different elements that you're writing in VS Code, and you'll see, you'll see the what those particular elements are doing for you in the body. And so what I realistically want to do is add some media to this. And so remember, one of the things we talked about last class and session was, oh, well, we can add images to our site as well. And so images are a very interesting element because as you can see, they don't have a closing tag. So as I try to type that close angle brace, it doesn't actually auto-complete with a actual closing tag because images are self-closing. So it kind of looks like this. Inside of this tag, we use an attribute that allows for us to define the source of the image. So if I want an image to put here, I just need the URL to that particular image. And you can get the URL of an image in a number of different ways, right? One way could be to add a particular file on your machine. And another way would be to find an actual URL online. And so just to show the sake of, hey, you can find images everywhere, I'm just gonna go ahead and go steal my LinkedIn profile image. So I'm just going to LinkedIn.com, my name, and hopefully this pulls up in a way that makes this easy for me. And I'm just going to take the image that has a URL from LinkedIn. Don't mind the load time, just go with the flow. Cool. So there's a nice little LinkedIn headshot. I'm going to right click. It says copy image address, open image in new tab. So I'm going to open the image in a new tab. And boom, there's that nice little beautiful Cam headshot. Love it. So I'm going to use that as the source of this particular image in my website. So boom, add that in there. And as you can see, it puts this very long LinkedIn URL in here. But that URL is going to be referencing a file that already exists online. So I can use this in this image tag that I just wrote. And so in my Cam song reviews, in a couple of seconds, when the server reloads with that particular change, we should see my beautiful face pop up here in the sake here. So I don't know why it's not, but it's not a good look when you're live streaming and your image don't want to work. Let me just go ahead and make sure. So got our image, boom, we put it in here, but our image is not showing up. That's bizarre. I'm gonna keep rolling and we'll fix it in a second. The real point of what I want to show though is I want it underneath our image. I don't know why it's not showing up right now.
Hey, do you need that slash? I don't think do you need that?
This one, yeah, I do. This is closing the image tag right here. So this is correct, but for right now, it's just not working. But yeah, I'll fix it in a bit, or maybe change it to a different image to test it. What I do want to do though is I want to add a couple of links that I'll use in order to direct people to another page of my website. Right, this is the more important piece. So I'm not really tripping over it right now. So what I want to do is I want to give a user an opportunity to see a bunch of different links that they can click with my particular reviews, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my first link. So my first link is going to use an anchor tag. I'm going to use the href attribute. I'll fill in the href attribute a little later, but the anchor tag is a nested tag. So I can add some HTML in between these two tags to show something visual for a user to click on. So in this case, I'm just going to say review 1 and allow that to come. And so we see here, review 1 is there, right? Clicking on review 1, nothing really good is going to happen yet because there's actually no link tied to it. But eventually what we'll do is add the necessary code to make those reviews pop up. So for now, I have these anchors and review 1, and let's say maybe I'll have 3 reviews, right? So I'll put another one in here and review 2, and I'll just copy this one more time and then make review 3. Cool. And right now I have all my links kind of showing up right here. So the goal will be to make it so each of these reviews connects to a specific page where somebody could go ahead and read that review, right? So what I can do to make that the case is I can create a new HTML page to serve as the reference for these anchors. So instead, we saw how we can use anchors to go to different pages, right? So let's say I did want somebody to go and check out my LinkedIn right? I can put a URL here, and in this case, this is a URL to my LinkedIn page, right? And the anchor will allow me to navigate somebody to that page, right? So clicking on that anchor, you can see it took me to my LinkedIn page. Anchors can be used to take someone to an existing page online, a URL to a page online, but you can also use anchors to send people to specific files that exist within your source code in your folder. So for me, instead of sending someone to a page that already exists, I want to send them to another HTML page, which is how we can create what we call multi-page HTML experiences. So to do that, what I want to do is go back to my elements, my files in my VS Code Explorer here. And you see how I have one HTML file in here. Well, what I'm going to do is just go ahead, right click and create a new file. And I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it review1.html. So now I have another HTML file inside of the same folder. It's called review1.html. And just like we did before, I got to sauce this up with a little bit of HTML. So just go ahead and do the basics. And so I'm going to say cool doc type HTML. Put that little comment declaration in there, and then I'm going to open up a new HTML tag. Inside of the HTML tag, I'll add a head, and I will add a body. All right, and voila, I have a new HTML page. The last thing I'll do, just to make sure that we know that this is review 1, I'm going to go ahead and put that in as a heading so that when we see this page, we know we're on review 1. So I'm going to save this right now, go back to my index.html. I don't know why the image isn't showing up, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it for now so I'm not tripping. And what I want to do, though, is change the anchor. Instead of pointing to this URL going to my LinkedIn page, I want to point it to that HTML page we just created. So when you're working with files inside of a folder, right, you're going to reference the file based on the path it has within your folder. So because the index page and the review 1 page are basically, there's no folders separating them. Because those 2 pages are right next to each other, I can actually just say, hey, this is going to reference this file that's also within this folder that I'm in right now. So I'm going to just say review1.html. So now review 1, my song reviews, my review 1 should take me to my review 1 page. And as you can see, now I have this review 1 page showing up. One thing that would be helpful for me is to make a quick little back button to go back to my home page from my review 1 page. So to do that, in the review 1 HTML, I'm just going to add a quick little anchor here, right? And in this anchor, I got to make sure I give it the attribute for the href. And I'm going to say index.html to go back to my home page. And then I'm just going to give that anchor a text for home. Or I could say, go back, right? So review 1, there's nothing there right now, but if I go back to my HTML homepage, right? So we can do the same thing for review 2 and 3. So what I'm gonna do is just copy review 1 HTML and just create 2 new, duplicate this a couple times. So I'm gonna go ahead, just add a new file, review2.html, and then review 3. Oops. My bad. Started typing in the wrong place. Review 3.html. So now I can copy what I had in review 1 and paste it here in review 2 and 3. So I'll just go ahead and copy that, change this to say review 2, save that, go to review 3, same thing, paste this, go to review. So now I change that to review 3. And so now my index page should have all 3 of these reviews connected in a way for me to go ahead and navigate to each review, go back, and each review should be tied to its own HTML page. And so clearly I forgot to do that here in the index. So got to make sure that each of these hrefs are tied to the corresponding review page. Otherwise, as you can see, when I was clicking, it wasn't actually pulling up the site. So then I'll go here, review 3.html. All right, bet. So now all of these reviews are connected to have their own HTML page, which is dope because now I can use all of the powers vested to me to use these spaces to start talking about my various reviews, right? So what I want to do is I want to allow for myself the opportunity to use these different review pages to just put their own individual HTMLs. And maybe what I'll do is change these names later to be about particular songs. And I can, sauce these pages up a little bit more with a variety of different things, right? I could embed some of the YouTube videos, et cetera, or and really just kind of go crazy, right, with these different reviews. The point is, in order to create these multi-page HTML experiences, I gotta just create a new HTML page and add an anchor to that particular page in the code. So as you can see, this is how we create multi-page HTML experiences, right? We have one HTML page, in this case, our index.html, and we use anchors to go and navigate to different HTML pages that are connected in our folder. Those different HTML pages can have their own HTML, right? So in each of these pages, I can add all types of other elements here. So I can say this is my first review, and I'm excited to tell y'all more about what I'm thinking, right? So this is review one, right? So if I go to review one, we can see that that paragraph is there now versus review two, nothing's there yet, and review three, nothing is there yet, right? So this is a bare bones thing, and for now I'll keep it pretty bare bones because you might take this on for yourself and start adding and saucing it up to your own degree, right? What I will do though is let's talk about, well, how does CSS work when you start thinking about multiple pages of HTML and different elements and et cetera that might show up on different pages, right? Well, just like we talked about before, we can connect the CSS page to our site very simply. So one thing we can do is add a new file in here in our folder. I'll call it styles.css. And this particular CSS file can be a place for us to begin to define like all the different CSS that we want to show up on these different, on the home page and on our different review pages. So to do that, right, I just kind of have to lay out the CSS the way that I want it to work on behalf of my particular application. So in this case, right, I might want to do certain things to make it so maybe like these anchors are a little bit more polished and a little bit easier to see, etc. So one thing I might do is just kind of target the anchor, right? And with CSS, what we do is CSS will look for particular elements and give those elements different properties and values, right? So in this case, if I want an anchor and all the anchors that I have on my document to be targeted, I can use the anchor selector to say, hey, find all the elements inside of my HTML document that use the anchor tag. And then I can give that particular anchor that it's finding some specific CSS. So one thing I might do is make it so that the font size of those anchors are a little bit bigger. So maybe I'll give it something crazy like 200%. Just say, hey, you know, blow this up a little bit. And I might do something like text align to kind of just center the text inside of those anchors a little bit more on the page. And what else might I want to do? I might want to get rid of these little underlines underneath them. For now, I think they're cool, but we can do all types of really interesting things styling these anchors. So for now, let's do this and connect this CSS page so that we have at least one of our HTML pages to test what the CSS is looking like. Once you have a CSS file, so in this case, I have this styles.css file, the only thing you need to do to connect the CSS to your HTML page is use a link tag in order to create a link to a specific CSS page. So we create a link with the link tag. The link tag has an attribute called rel, which defines the relationship between a linked file and the corresponding HTML document. And it allows for us to pass in an href with a URL to that particular file. So in this case, it's called styles.css. And then I just want to close the link. So here, as you can see, adding that CSS just instantly blew up our anchors a little bit. So that's great to know that that CSS is connected. We can start doing all types of interesting things stylistically on the site. One thing that I am thinking about is, you know, each of these sites might have some very similar elements going on in, right? So we have an H1, we'll have an anchor, at least one that says go back to something. And then we might have, like I had before, a little paragraph that says, you know, some description of some kind. So, you know, take a look at my latest reviews. save this, and now like clearly that paragraph text is a little small, so I might want to go ahead and add some CSS to make that paragraph text also a little bit larger. So font size here, and maybe I want to just kind of make sure that that has a little bit more size to it. So we see I use the percent here in the font size, but we also can use different things like pixel sizes here. So, I could do something like let's say like 100 pixels and kind of just take a look at what happens. So 100 pixels is clearly pretty large, right? So I'm gonna go down a little bit, maybe something like 40 pixels, and boom, like, okay, not the most beautiful, but it is functional, right? What's cool about this though, is with this same CSS file, I can allow for my other HTML pages to connect to that same CSS file. So in the review1.html, I can do the same thing. And I can say, hey, create a link to a style sheet. And that link is going to, that style sheet is going to be defined at the style.css file that we created. So just like that, I have this review1 HTML also leveraging the same styling as the first styles. This is one of the reasons why using a style sheet is actually very helpful, because you can pass it to multiple CSS files or multiple HTML files, excuse me, just this easily, right? So now, because these two are connected, we can see similarities in the way that they're styled. Review 2 and Review 3 don't have the CSS connected to it, so you can clearly see that there's some differences in how Review 2 and Review 3 look. So I might want to say, okay, bet I want these style sheets to be across the board used in all of the other files. So I'll go ahead and just make sure I add them to the head of those other two reviews, and we'll go from there. Cool. So now I have a multi-page HTML site. I have one CSS file that is responsible for connecting to those different HTML sites. And I can start defining all new HTML in each of these reviews, as well as all the styling in the CSS file to have those different review pages adapt. And now you can see Review 2 and Review 3 kind of have a similar style to the other ones, right? Well, this is great, but over time, I might want to have like specific things going on in each of these pages. So let's say let's say Review 1, I want to review, maybe instead of this, like, let's say for instance, right now, instead of reviewing songs, I might want to review colors, right? So to make that quick change real quick, just to show y'all a really interesting example before we break here, I'll say Cam's color reviews, right? And just change this a little bit. So I have now these 3 reviews can be about colors instead of songs or something real quick. So each of these reviews might be about a particular color. So maybe Review 1, I'll say, is about blue. Review 2 is about red. And Review 3 is about, purple or something, right? So making those quick changes, you can see that it changed the anchor here. One thing I might want to do is have these be a list instead of kind of these horizontal anchors. That's something that you can look into for yourself to try to figure out, how can I get this to be a list where everything is kind of vertically aligned instead of horizontally aligned. There's an HTML element you can use, or some CSS styling you can use to make that the case. But for now, let's say each of these reviews I want to be about a particular color, right? So Review 1 is about blue, Review 2 is about red, and Review 3 is about purple, right? Well, what if I want to be cool about this and I want my Review 1 about blue to be I want this to be particularly blue, right? Or something about this to be blue. Well, what I want to do in order to do that might be like, hey, what if each review on the different pages, we can change something about how that review is presented, right? So maybe like, for instance, I want the background color to be the color that you're reading about, right? So in that case, or maybe even easier, I could just have the heading color be that color to start with, right? So I want basically in review 1, the H1 to be blue. And in review 2, the H1 to be red. And in review 3, the H1 to be purple, right? Well, how can I target those particular elements with what we know so far, right? Well, if I said H1 and I said, hey, let's change the color to blue, right? That might be your first intuition based on what you know so far, right? So clearly that changed review 1 to blue. But if I go back, right? Well, now this is blue, right? And this is blue as well, right? And clearly that's not what I want. I want this specific element that I'm looking at to be blue and not the ones that are not the specific elements I'm looking at. So this current setup of how I'm using CSS is actually not helpful to me because it's not targeting the specific element in a way that's more specific, right? And in this case, this is a great opportunity to use attributes that will allow us to specify these elements with more specificity, right? And so what I want to do is introduce you to 2 important attributes that you can add to any HTML element that you create in a document. Those 2 attributes are the ID and class attributes. So basically, we have 2 attributes that we can use in order to specify a specific element, the class attribute and the ID attribute. They both do very similar things, but the difference between the ID and the class is just that the ID attribute only is unique. So you can only have one element in a document with the ID attribute, and class attributes allow you to target multiple. So I'll show you how we can apply this based on this in this little quick example. So I have a bunch of H1s, right? These headings. If I want to make it so that, hey, maybe the headings in each review is able to be targeted in a specific way, right? I might say, hey, each of these reviews are a part of a specific class, and those class could be something like reviews, right? Class attributes allow for you to specify give these elements particular kind of descriptions, titles, or text, if you will, that you can use to target them in CSS or find them using JavaScript. So the idea is, real quick, my bad, y'all. Just had to put that in there. The idea with attributes and classes is you can create and target these specific ones. So I'm gonna give these H1s the reviews class, right? And what that will allow me to do is say, hey, any attribute that's using dot reviews, right? And so dot syntax allows for us to target an element with a particular class, right? So in this case, the class for reviews will allow for me to say, hey, this particular element will get any element that has this class will have specific styling to it. So here, let's do something like make the color something different, like orange or something way different than blue, right? So right now, we can see that the H1 for the main thing is still blue, but if I go to the review 1, I think I didn't save this. Yeah, I didn't save this. If I go to review 1, right, now we see that it's orange, right? And if I go real quick and add all of these other reviews to have a similar class, right? So each review page, I'm just gonna add in the H1 a class called reviews, right? That will make it so each of my review classes or each of my headings within the review pages will be orange, right? So review 2 is orange and review 3 is also orange, right? Because they all share that same class. And so instead of targeting the element specifically, right, with just the class name, right, or with the element name, like we were doing with the original H1, right, by using something like dot reviews, I can target that specific group of elements that has this class name. The difference between the class and the ID is that with a class, we can repeat this like this. But with an ID, the element, only one element can have the ID, have an ID. But with a class, we can create as many elements with that same class name that we might want. For me right now, right, this is cool for starting out, but what I realistically want to do is have each review have its own color. So how could I do that? Well, I could do something like, hey, like I'm going to target review 1 and give that color blue. But I want to target review 1 and say, hey, if review 1 is blue, none else can be blue. This would be a great opportunity to use IDs. And IDs use a different kind of syntax for creating a reference to that particular element than classes. You use the pound or hashtag sign to target an element with a specific ID. So in this case, review 1, any element with the ID of review 1 will be blue. So what I want to do is, let me just kind of put this toward the bottom here because CSS is funny. And save this, go to review 1. And instead of having this class reviews, right, I'm just going to say this particular heading is going to be ID review 1, right? So what this is going to do is make it so when I go to review 1, right, this is blue. But if I go back to review 2 or review 3, those are still orange because they still have the class tied to it. So just like we just did, I want to do a similar thing, but instead of just having review 1, I'm going to go ahead and have review 2 be red, and then have review 3 be purple. And that way we can give these specific elements their unique kind of color way, right? And go to each of those particular reviews, those particular review pages, and add that so that those particular reviews have that kind of difference. So say review 2 has an ID of review 2, and review 3 has an ID instead of a class, has an ID of review 3, right? And now we kind of have this really dope styling going on where each page has a very unique kind of color attached to it, right? And at the end of the day, right, any element that's not one of those 3 reviews is back to being normal, right? So the class is great if we want to target a group of elements with a similar kind of attribute, with similar kind of properties and stuff. But we use IDs to start to target elements individually with their own, to give them kind of their own unique ID. That's what the ID is for. Classes are like unique IDs, but you can share them across other elements. But with all of this, right, now I have kind of the makings of an actually really interesting multi-page HTML site, right? I have all of the different, I have an HTML document connecting to all those different HTML pages. And I have in each of those HTML pages a kind of scenario where they're still tied to the same CSS file, but now I can start to target them more specifically. So anything for the review 1 page, I can start to give these elements very specific IDs and classes so that it knows, hey, I'm in the review 1 styling, right? And not the styling of everyone else. And that will allow you to start to make your sites a little bit more nuanced with relationship to what each page is going to be able to show. So classes and IDs are a very important set of attributes to add to your arsenal. But with what you have right now, you can start a really cool review page for yourself where each of these different things can reference or talk about whatever really you want it to talk about. So whether that's song reviews like I was doing before, whether that's a blog about different pieces of content, take your pick, have fun, continue to hack us with HTML, CSS, and that is it. That is it. So appreciate y'all for rocking with me.